curious if you could share a little bit about your Yin origin story, how you came to be where you are.
Yeah. So depends on how far back you want me to go, because like I can trace it back to like when my sister gave me the Dao De Jing for my birthday, like when I was in college, which was like probably 20 years ago now. And that kind of planted the seed that eventually made me appreciate Bernie Clark's book when I found it, because I knew about Taoism and like, so I was always doing yoga like on my own. I never went to classes and I just kind of learned from books and did it however felt good. So I was like just stretching a lot. Like I would do sun salutations for like 10 minutes per like round because it just felt good to be in the poses. So when I found Bernie Clark's book, like I think like most people, I was like, oh, this is for me. Like it talks about Taoism and like just stretching and relaxing. And so like just to kind of shorten the story a little bit, like when I decided to start putting like trainings together was I just started to realize, because I have a teaching background, like school teaching. So I used to be a public school teacher and I taught art to kids full time. So in New York, I had to get a lot of training for that. So I had a lot of like experience putting curriculum together and understanding how people learn. And so that kind of gave me the confidence to be like, I think I can do this. Sorry, cats. And then as I put it together, I realized I don't have to hire a designer because I have that art background. So I would just design everything, and that saved me a ton of like startup money. And it's, I don't know how far you want me to go into the story, but like I've recently started to really embrace, like you've been saying, when you wanted to do these interviews, I was like, oh yeah, everybody teaches these trainings slightly different based on their personalities, like just like regular weekly yoga teachers teach their classes. And so I've started to embrace like my teaching as like what makes my trainings different. I talk a lot more about like what teaching is as a skill independent of content, and like the art background like kind of helps me to try to either talk more about or just understand better, like intuiting what people perceive and how they understand things. Because art was always like, if I use this color, what are people going to interpret that as? So like when I'm sitting in a classroom, like I'm always kind of like, what is that person's personality and how are they going to interpret this lecture slide or that kind of comment about an asana? So I've started to try to embrace those kind of unique qualities more.
I love that. I love that. And I love seeing some of the, do you use cards? I've seen some of these images on your Instagram of these like beautiful and kind of evocative, like they evoke a certain ethos that I'm sure is what you bring to the training. And it's funny because I have these sequencing cards too that are very different and they evoke something different. But I really can imagine like the use of color that I've seen, and like there's like a floating quality in
with the asana in particular, or
in the cards that I've seen of you, like the images that I've seen that you've curated and shared of. I'll probably put one over this so people can like see what we're talking about.
nice. Right here.
Not that fancy, like that.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love the integrated background that you have, and the perspective of not only art but teaching, like the art of teaching, and how that could be so useful, because so many people are not purists when it comes to Yin, right? I and at least in my trainings, I don't know what your experience is, but I often get people that are curious about Yin, or people who are looking for a credential, or people who are just looking for something to do to round out their abilities inside of the studio space where they teach. Some are doing it for personal reasons, but some are doing it just to like round out their curriculum. And so it's really nice to be able to offer something to them that they can take with them regardless of what they choose to teach. Right.
Yeah. I like the tangible quality of like the cards. and so many things. It's a weird balance, like, because you're giving them the experience, but you also kind of want to give them some mementos in a way. But then at the same time, you want to like save trees and be able to travel with your materials to give out. And it's like, so I find it a really fascinating balance of like what are people getting? How can I give more, but also not like just overload them with material things at the same time. So it's always kind of fun to try to figure out like what's useful to a yin teacher after they leave.
I love that. Speaking of materials, what kinds of texts do you provide or resource or ask people to read when you think about, like, do you have the cards, right? You offer kind of a number of different materials. Can you talk a little bit about what comes with the training, you know, what people can expect?
Yeah. So with my art background, I'm always kind of making stuff. So I kind of have packaged like the lectures into like ebooks. And then during the pandemic, I tried to be productive, but also like gentle with myself. But one of the things I did was I designed like a 250 page plus manual. So I like redesigned the manual. And I had to do that also to apply to offer a 200-hour yin yoga training. So Yoga Alliance required like a lot. So I made this huge manual. And then the cards, the images you're talking about seeing are the new ones. So those I'm going to be printing this year. And then a couple of years ago, I wrote a book about yin yoga because I found the manual was kind of giving technical information, and the asanas were obviously just kind of reminders of the asana. But I was saying a lot during the lectures that weren't in the lectures. It was just me kind of talking about things and freestyling. So I put all of that into a book. And Bernie Clark actually wrote the introduction for it. I was like so honored. Like, he's like such a sweetheart. Like, if people are watching this, and I can recommend anyone, and I'm sure you feel the same, like take Bernie's training. Like,
That's literally what my website says. My website says like, oh, you're interested in yin, that's so great. You should take Bernie's training. And
yeah.
here's what I offer and how it's different than how it builds on. But like, yes, I want, like, take Bernie's training.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, it's weird. Like, I always feel strange calling someone a master of something. Like, I'm very particular about it. But like, if there's a master of yin, it's Bernie. Like, I really like appreciate like all the spreading of yin that he did.
I think kind of like a shepherd, like the grand shepherd, but I visualize him as sort of like the Lord of the Rings. Like there's
Gandalf.
What of the Gandalfy shepherd of yin.
I could totally see that.
You know, I love that, and I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I love that he wrote the foreword for your book as well.
Yeah, I felt like just, I don't know, like a little kid, like meeting your hero when he was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I was like, what? So there's that book. And then the only text I require people to read is the Tao Te Ching, because it's like, I feel like everything else they'll learn from practice, but like the spirit of yin, I find is something that's hard to get across, but like the most important, because so many people take like the asana and just think, oh, it's just slower regular yoga. And it takes so much work, like as a trainer of like yin teachers, to get them to feel and be like, ah, okay, this is different. And now I know why. Like, and I feel like the Tao Te Ching kind of starts to let people know like what is really being talked about.
I love that. I love that. I often say in yin, the teacher is more a midwife than a master. You know, that there is this completely different perspective from other styles of yoga where the teacher is the authority and says, you are doing this correctly, we're not doing this correctly. And we can't know, like we as teachers can't know if a student is doing it correctly without asking them and saying,
Yeah.
do you feel this? Where do you feel this? What do you feel? And I think so much of what I teach is a different approach to the same kind of idea. I don't require the Tao Te Ching, but I talk about, you know, I don't trust my students to tell me how they feel, because in the United States, we have no idea how we feel.
Yeah. Good luck.
Our whole culture is like, well, you look great. Who cares how you feel? We're such an aesthetic based culture that rings true for people who experience my trainings. And our job is to like support people in figuring out, do I feel? How do I feel? Where do I feel? What do I
What is
feel?
healing? Yeah.
What is feeling? How do I go about doing that? And I think there's so many interesting mechanisms and ways to go about doing that, and doing that in a way that, of course, there's a garbage truck outside. I don't know if you can hear it.
No, I don't hear it. Edit that out.
This is real. This is real. We're doing it real, city style. Yeah, there's this like fine balance I think that we have as people who are supporting other people and learning how to support other people and feeling, and you want to feel some and not too much, and like, you know, Bernie talks about the Goldilocks, and I love that makes sense to him to say like, oh, it's too hard, too soft, just right, too big, too small, just right, too hot, too cold, just right. And like for me, I was this person who grew up in the United States in this like female body. I was like, what is just right? Because I don't know that I'm hungry till I'm starving. I don't know I'm tired until I'm exhausted. I don't even go to the bathroom for, like I'll walk in somewhere and then, as a school teacher, I'm sure you can resonate with this experience where you're like, wow, I've had to go to the bathroom for the last 6 hours and I just have not.
Yeah, yeah, we like push ourselves and
We just
try to
like,
just muscle through it.
what is just right? Like, no orientation to that.
It's kind of like it's like a weird process of getting people to listen to something that's been there all the time. Like, because trying to get somebody to listen to like a stranger is like hard enough, or like family is difficult, but like trying to get them to listen to the thing they've been ignoring their whole life, like it's kind of like Google ads. You get so used to seeing them that like your mind just blanks out on them. It's a blind spot. And like people's bodies are like blind spots to them sometimes. And it's like, you live in this thing? Like let's listen to it a little bit and learn how to do that.
Right. Yes. Yes. The way that I teach this is the edge of the Grand Canyon, because it finally made sense to me when I visited. I'm sure, have you ever visited the Grand Canyon? It's a
No,
big
not
hole,
yet.
really, really like big, big in a way that you like. Grand is not an appropriate word for this thing. When you think about the edge of the Grand Canyon, right? There's two ways to experience the edge. You can walk up to the edge and curl your toes over, and you're like, "Ooh, I have a feeling," or you can dingle in by your fingertips, and you have a feeling. And so many of the people that take my training are danglers. You're like, how do I get the most out of this feeling? And I'm like, you could also just like approach the edge. And maybe if there's a guardrail, which is like props, there's like a guardrail, you could like really experience the edge, but not really experience, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That for me was like, I couldn't figure out what just right was, but the edge I could do.
I even had to like change the edge word. I didn't like that word. It felt like it's too edgy. Like this isn't punk rock yoga. Like, so I call it the threshold. Like, cause I'm like, threshold feels like you got some space to like play and relax. And yeah, every time I said the edge in a class, I was just like, that's too sharp.
I love it. And I love the, like we were saying, there's so many different ways to approach, there are so many right ways to approach the teaching, and that word feels right to you and resonates with your students. And, um, when I get to have this chat with you, then later I get to go and be like, oh, how do I feel about the word edge versus threshold? Am I going to try on threshold and see how that works for me?
It's my like artist's like poetry background. Like I'm like, I want to, I check the sources all the time. So I'm like, what's a better word if there is one? And like, I find I do that a lot. And it somehow works for yin. I think that's why I like it so much, because yin is like, it's so individualized. It's like learning about your body and making a practice that's so personal for you, even though there's some like structure to it. And it's like, well, then why can't we change the words to what feels right for us? Or like modeling as like a teacher to future teachers, like how much this is about your students and about like their experience and not like ours as like you said, we're not an authority figure. It's like the midwife or a caretaker.
Right. Someone who's there to like observe the process and gently maybe guide and offer support where it's needed, but not to necessarily direct the process, or maybe gently, I don't know. To me, that like just resonates. My background is in birth. I worked as a doula and a midwife's assistant for an entire
Okay.
year before I started doing this. And so I draw all of these parallels between the experience of birth, which is just an experience of transformation,
Yeah.
right? It's just a really iconic kind of experience of transformation. But
How do you feel like that influences your teaching of other teachers, like the midwife experience and doula? I'm not too familiar with it, so I'm curious.
yeah, so a midwife is somebody that is a clinical birth attendant. They have some medical training, and they might operate in the hospital or out of the hospital. A doula it's a Greek word. It means a slave of a woman, which we don't really like to lead with. But a doula is somebody who provides the educational, emotional, spiritual, and physical support, the non-clinical support for a laboring person. And so that could be, teaching what's happening inside the body. That could be the interface between the clinician and what the clinician is saying and the individual. It could be offering hands-on, like pain support measures and all different kinds of things. Sometimes I just will like unskillfully describe a doula as someone who plays a tambourine in the corner, like doesn't nobody really understands what it is that we're doing there, but it is shepherding. It's being witness to the process and supporting and guiding the process. I had to draw it once, and I thought of it as like, I don't think of it as the eye of the hurricane, but I think of it as like the guardrails around this transformational process. Like you're this like tornado-y kind of thing, and like the doula's role is just this, to like contain, to hold space.
I was just going to say, it sounds like, yeah, like creating and holding space for birth, which has got to be powerful and also like just really sublime in a way, aside from the chaos and the tornado, I guess, as well.
Well, and for some of us, for me, my nervous system operates like on an 11 out of 10 all the time. That's where I land. I'm not the yin person that's like, very mellow. And so yin is such a medicine for me because I'm able to locate that. Like I'm able to touch into that for half a second.
Yeah.
But I operate up there, and sometimes that's where birth is. And so when that is happening, I get very calm. I become the eye of the hurricane. I can be really centered in these liminal or sometimes stressful kinds of circumstances. If I have to parallel park a car, I melt into a puddle. Like I'm just like, I'm going home. I can't manage this. If the stakes are very low, I have to choose something from a menu. I have to parallel park a car. I am out of there. Like my brain dissolves. But in that circumstance of holding space, like that is my dharma, no question. I can hold space wherever that is. And so much of what I teach is putting words and vocabulary and technique to this concept of holding space, to hold space for an individual, to hold space for a group of people in a transformational experience, because the practice of yin, it could be a micro transformation, it could be a macro transformation, right?
Yeah.
Anything could unfold in the space so long as we allow that, we can't make people feel, I don't believe we can make people feel safe, but we can create a container where they could access the feeling of safety. And if we can do that, then the yin does the work.
Yeah. Their body does it all.
The body does the work. And, so that's the weird amorphous stuff that I teach. And I'm like, yeah, come do a yin training. But I don't spend a lot of time working with each individual pose and saying, how would we do this? How would we set this up? I say, okay, we're just going to partner up and you're going to work with your person. They're going to practice a yin practice, and you are going to support them with what you have. and you're going to talk about it, and you're going to ask, and you're not going to be like, oh, should I be getting 2 blocks and a blanket for this? No, you're going to be like, what if I'm going to use this sweatshirt here and just like, I'm going to ask about this. And what, as it turns out, we're all pretty good at that. If the focus is just, what does this person like, is this person over the edge of the cliff? Are they approaching the edge of the cliff? Are they back in the van, like air conditioned, cozy seats? You know, where do they want to be? Do they know where they are? Can they communicate that to me? Can I use my nonverbal perceptive skills and just, you know, rotate the block onto the next height, or put some stuff in there, you know? That's so much of what we do, which sometimes it's hard to articulate before the like, what are we going to do? Well,
Yeah,
we work together in how we go about doing that, and we can share the strategies and what it was that we saw.
it's cool that people can learn that, like that humans, because I mean, we don't learn it anywhere, and like they don't teach in school like how to be empathetic towards other people and how to like care for them and understand what they're going through, and how to help them to release what they need to release. And so it's almost kind of feels at first like, oh, humans don't do this, and it's so like distraught, but then it's like you teach people to do it within like however many days the training is, and you're like, they can learn to do this, there's hope. Like it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, right. Like it's to me, the thing that I didn't intend to teach yin trainings. You know, I came back from the training that we both experienced with Bernie, and I had a friend who was a physical therapist who was a yoga teacher, and she said, can you teach us what you learned? And I was like, yeah, it's pretty easy. You just like flop to one side and then you flop to the side. It's like elephant seals, you know, you just.
Nice. Elephant seals. I've never used that metaphor. I have to start. That's a good one.
It's just what they, you know, it's just like they flop over on the beach, and like it doesn't actually matter where you put your arm, and all, like you're looking for a sensation, like that's it. And so here's, okay, let's do it 1 day training. And then people were like, oh, is there more? And I was like, no, that's it. Like you flop, that's it. So then I offered a level 2.
It. That has to be a t-shirt. Yin yoga, you flop. That's it.
I mean, I offered more than that. Definitely I offered more than that. But this like, I easily divorced myself from the idea that like the shape of the pose is what matters. And so what I was communicating by the flopping is just saying like the perception from the outside of what the shape looks like is irrelevant. And so we did 1 day, and then they said, well, would you, is there more? And I was like, sure. So we put together a level 2. So my level 1 is 1 day. It's just sort of like the basics of Chinese medicine when it comes to meridians. We do 6 lower body meridians. We do the basics of kind of poses. We use Bernie's formula, and then we layer my formula on top of that in terms of like how to go about doing those things. We talk about the space, like the sensory space of the experience. So you could like go forth and offer a class, and it would be good. You know, it's the Toll House cookie version where like pretty much everybody is like, I'm down. I'll eat a Toll House chocolate chip cookie. I'll see if I can get a sponsorship from them to like put across the bottom. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I know how to bake them. Like I follow the recipe, it works out just fine. And level 2 is sort of like, okay, but what is this? Like, what happens when you use brown sugar or white sugar? What happens when you use that? You know, like you kind of do a little bit of that. And so I get into wall work, I get into upper body meridians, and I do sequencing. And for me, sequencing is the jam. I don't have a recipe for sequencing. I have a methodology for sequencing. And that methodology requires a lot of work from the individual teacher so that nobody sequences the way that I do. And nobody sequences the way the other ones do, but they come up with a common mechanism to be able to share and talk about that. And what I think people get from that is a sense of like a renewed sense of confidence. What I've noticed over and over is that this really unhelpful timidity that comes from a 200-hour training, that so many people have been trained to feel incompetent.
Really?
To feel like, ooh, I don't want to hurt people.
Yeah.
I don't, I want to do it the right way. Like, I want to know I'm doing it the right way. And you have to tell me if I'm doing it the right way or not. And in order
Yeah.
for me to know that, I should take more training. So I know if it's the right way. And eventually I offered a level 3. So I do offer a 50-hour training, but most people kind of take it a la carte. I would say about half of the people that take level 1 take level 2. And maybe a third of the people that take level 1 end up taking level 3. And sometimes they take it back to back, and sometimes they take it over a long period of time. What's important to me is that people could, like you, I have a background in some adult educational theory. And so I scaffold the training so that it builds and layers upon itself. And I'm really good at making stuff sticky, like I'm a storyteller. So I like make things mentally sticky. I paint word pictures. Like, you paint beautiful image pictures, and maybe you do word pictures too, but for me, I'm like a word painter. So
Yeah, I like metaphors a lot. I use metaphors all the time.
all the time. And so yeah, I mean, I want people to remember, students, teachers, etc., their own like innate authority and wisdom. And there's a balance, right? There's confidence and humility. Like, you could be too confident, but you could also be too humble in the seat of the teacher. I just be like, I don't know, so like in Yin, we really got to dance with, how can I find confidence in supporting a student? How can I find confidence in that humility that says, wow, I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Like, a teacher is ready when they can admit they don't know stuff. Then it's like, okay, you're going to be a good teacher. You can't admit that. It's too dangerous to let you go into the world and teach.
Exactly. Will you tell me the container of your training? Like, what are the logistics? People come and they do asana practice, they do things virtually, they do some mix, what's the container of your training?
So I really like the immersive format. So I've kind of just started doing like 100 hours over like 8 to 10 days, depending on the studio. And each day is like a full day of there's a lecture each day, and then asana lab, like just studying each asana and trying it out and talking about it. And there's a sharing circle each day. I find actually the sharing circles I just kind of did that at the beginning because it felt right. But since it's been going on, I'm like, oh, okay. So much of what happens in the sharing circles or because of the sharing circle. Like, it's just I find providing avenues for processing is really important and helpful. So like journaling, they have to do, and I don't like prescribe it's just kind of like, this is a lot of information. So like, write stuff down in your own words, like every day, what you did or what you learned. And then there's the practice teach at the end of the week. So it's pretty simple components. And the lectures are like different, and obviously the asana is different every day. So, and then there's like an hour class every day that I guide. And I try to make the class like their chance to just relax and immerse in it, but also like each day I'll change stuff. So it's kind of like modeling different things that they can do. So I always like contexts of teachers in a learning environment. Like when I like learned to be a school teacher, I found it really fascinating, like the meta quality of like, we are learning how to work with students as students ourselves right now, becoming teachers. And I find that so useful because you can look at your own kind of tendencies and kind of extrapolate what your students are going to feel in the future. So I kind of like use the morning guided session as like, did you like the music? No. Why? Like, did you like the lighting? No. Why? So I try to make it relaxing, but also doing things where like there may be something they don't like, and that's an opportunity for them to learn so that they understand what their students are going through. So that's kind of like in a nutshell, like the structure of everything.
I love that. I love the immersive opportunity and the chance to work with a cohort in that way, kind of have some deep relationships. I imagine some of your students stay in touch and have some
Yeah.
relationships after that. And yeah, I do something similar when it comes to like, okay, I'm gonna try this music, now that music. Now what is your response to that music? And then I often, every day we do what I call the AB split class, where half of the students practice and the other half are offering support, whether that's hands-on kinds of stuff or preparing props or whatever, but the midwifey kind of stuff.
Nice.
And then we switch, and also we switch teachers. So I have an assistant that teaches, and they don't teach Kari Kwinn Yin, they teach their style of Yin. They teach the same sequence of poses, but a wildly different experience as people switch and have the other one. And that gives people too the opportunity to experience how completely different time feels
Yeah.
when you are in the pose and when you are supporting the pose, you know, because it can feel 5 minutes in caterpillar can feel like nothing when you're practicing. And when you are offering support and your job is not to just stand there and stare at somebody, but also not to stare into your phone, but also like you're learning to hold the space.
Yeah. And not like talk too much because you're afraid your students are like bored or something. It's like they're not bored. Their hamstrings are talking to them a lot.
They're in it. How are we going to leverage that? So I love that you get that, and you get that in a different way as well. And that people get that sort of daily opportunity and iteration to have that in a somewhat similar body. So not like, well, this is how my body felt about this 6 years ago, but how my body feels about this yesterday versus today versus tomorrow, and like have that ongoing conversation with the body. Love that.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now? You reading anything
I'm
exciting?
actually rereading some stuff. So there's one I started rereading just to see if I wanted to. It's called Hagakure or Hagakura. It's a samurai, a book written by a samurai way back in the day. And so it's just like little ideas and codifications of like principles that samurai thought was important. But I'm really looking forward to rereading there's two books, one on Tonglen, like giving, taking, compassion, meditation by Pema Chodron. It's like a tiny little book, and I always kind of put it in my bag, like in hopes that I'll read it, and I'm hoping that this time is the time I reread it. And then there's another book which I read a while ago called Tibetan Mind Training, and it's all about like, I think it's like 9 principles, and it's all about just, I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, being as humble as you can possibly be. It basically is like all these ideas about like if someone is upset, like you kind of give over to their upsetness and like comfort them, or if they're upset at you, you just accept that they're upset at you, or like if you walk into a room, like try to be like the least like attention getting person in the room. And it's all these kind of things that like really shines a light on Tibetan culture. And I read it a while ago, and it just changed everything about what I thought was possible. Because like modern society and Western society, we're all very much like, it's about me, what do I have to get, and like what, like I can't let people take advantage of me and this and that. And like it's very like the ego gets really strong that way. So this book is kind of like saying like your ego is shit. Like check yourself. And I love reading it for that reason.
I love that. I love that. I'll have to check it out. I'm reading right now Radical Dharma. I don't know if you've read it.
Sounds familiar.
It's Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, who's an American Zen priest, in collaboration with a couple of other folks, talking about, and it was written I think 4 or 5 years ago, but it is talking about our responsibility, and it comes from the Buddhist lens. It doesn't come from the yogic lens, although they all, the co-authors talk about how we navigate some of like how we navigate incorporating the benefits of Eastern wisdom without appropriating Eastern wisdom, and how we can have reverence but yet apply. And this is really interesting to me, right? Because I feel like our culture is just different, like you were just mentioning. You know, we live in a world of artificial light, we live in a world of social media, we live in a world of traffic, we live in a world that really has a bizarre relationship with sleep and with food. And these are not things that have been addressed classically in these Eastern wisdom traditions specifically. And that doesn't mean that they don't apply. I think they very much apply. But how do we skillfully go about incorporating the wisdom without appropriating it and like making it understandable and useful in a scenario where, you know, you're not going to dig into any sort of Eastern text and learn about how to put your phone down before you go to bed. Like there's not going to be a little sutra
Yeah.
about blue light and a sutra about you know, these bizarre ways that we relate to things like food and technology and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I think it's a really interesting, it's really thought-provoking and well written. I'm more familiar with Tibetan Buddhism than I am with Zen Buddhism. So I feel like now I need to, you know, bird walk over into, it's a gateway, you know, everything is a gateway. It's like my next book will have to be a little bit more about the philosophy of Zen Buddhism, because I often think that yoga and Taoism hold hands and yoga and Buddhism hold hands, but I don't understand the subtle nuance differences.
It's really, I love Zen. Like that's my probably my favorite, but I find it pairs so well with Tibetan traditions. Because like I feel like to like Zen kind of empties you out and like reminds you that like nothing has anything to it. Everything is just a thing that you experience. And then if you kind of follow that, you end up like empty, like in not an existential way, but in kind of a like wow, okay, like that's a different way of being. And then Tibetan stuff I find fills you back up with like the good stuff. Like it's got all of the principles like of compassion and like the trying to keep the ego from overwhelming and taking over. And it's like I oscillate between the two. Like when I need to empty, it's all about Zen. And then when I'm like, okay, I need to fill up with something now, it's like, okay, what Tibetan stuff do I need to revisit? So yeah, it's a great pair.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. I'm excited to, I'm halfway through the book, so I need to keep reading it and then maybe dig into a little bit more of that experience too.
Nice.
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about your trainings, about you, about your lineage, and anything that I didn't ask you about?
Nothing ever really comes to mind. Like, it's because, like I said, I'm so into Zen and like that Tibetan book of like let your ego go. So I probably wouldn't think of anything in particular. But I love talking about this stuff. Like, if there's any like philosophical stuff you want to chat about, or like just other general questions, I could talk about this forever. But I try to keep myself in check from like just
Oh,
going off on tangents.
good. Well, I'm sure we could dip in again sometime and talk about philosophy. Philosophy is actually very hard for me. I always say I'm like the breakfast cereal philosopher, where it's really, I've really had a challenge my whole life picking up some sort of philosophical text from any lineage or tradition and letting it kind of make sense to me. I'm the elephant seal person. I'm like, I get it. Or, you know, like I have to really take it to the most basic bumper sticker to understand anything. So I would love to be able to talk about any insights that you have when it comes to, I mean, I think I would love to be able to talk sometime about the ways in which you fold in this Taoist, the lineage of Taoism that you bring to the training that you offer, because I think that Yin can feel familiar to people, and Taoism, at least in the circles in which I travel, I think that people might be able to identify, or they may have read like the Tao of Pooh, you know, like
Yeah,
the Tao of Pooh, or something like that, you know, which for me is so helpful. I remember reading that book and I was like, oh, this makes so like this is philosophy that I can dig into. I really need the one-liners and the nuggets and like a chance to sit with that and see what unfolds. So I would love to be able to do that sometime. I want to be respectful of your time and of who needs to use this room next.
Oh, yeah, anytime you want. Happy to. I love
I,
this.
I would love that. I appreciate Yin because I believe, I hope to outlive my ability to do a handstand personally. And Yin feels like a practice that will be with me.
Yeah.
And so I love for people to experience that in such a way that it resonates and feels like it doesn't need to be the achievement focused or the aesthetic focused practice, but it does get into something quieter and more lasting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly how I feel about like Zen meditation. It's like to my last breath, that'll be there for me.
And isn't that lovely, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, TJ. I really appreciate you taking all the time, you and your kitties.
Yeah, thank you. They went to sleep now. They're napping.
Perfect. Lulled into sleep. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I will be in
Yeah,
touch
thank
with you.
you.
I'll ping you when I'm ready to put this out into the world, and we'll do it
Cool.
again.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.
You.